someone who has it all together through my achievements and successes. Head girl, youth MP for the Prime Minister, chairperson of my local youth council, doing a TEDx talk, for goodness sake. I am and always have been the person who is always busy, always stepping up to a challenge, always smiling. But beneath all of that, under the accolades and the smile, I was struggling a lot more than people knew. You see, we love to celebrate people for keeping it all together, but we rarely take the time to notice when they're barely holding on. In 2020, my dad was diagnosed with a cancerous stage 4 tumor in his brain. For 3 years, he gave it everything he had. Through surgeries and scans, he still remained the most loving dad I could have ever asked for. But by the end of 2023, he passed away. That was the hardest thing I have ever had to go through, watching the strongest man I have ever known deteriorate in front of me. Ever since that first diagnosis, my world, my family's world, had changed. But on the outside, I didn't look any different. Most people never knew that I was also quietly navigating anxiety, depression, and thoughts of taking my own life. No one really expected that from me. Not Abby, the girl who constantly knew what to say with the speeches and always laughing. So I just didn't say much about it at all. I didn't know how to. And when I eventually opened up about how I was struggling, people didn't know what to do with it. They didn't show up, not in the way that I needed. It felt like everyone assumed I'd be okay just because I always had been. I was met with a lot of be strong and look after yourself constantly. It was exhausting. I would open up to people about how I was struggling, and it felt like the responsibility to fix everything and carry that weight was placed back on me, alone. Have you tried breathing exercises, Abby? Make sure you make time for yourself, Abby. You are just so strong, Abby. But hardly anyone eased that weight. Hardly anyone offered to just talk about it. Hardly anyone showed up. And that's when I realized firsthand the stigma around mental health. It's uncomfortable, awkward, and something that we just don't talk about. But that stigma is often worse than the disease or issue itself. It leaves those struggling to struggle alone. In our society today, there is a tendency to rely on self-care as a form of advice or a remedy to a mental health issue. Bubble baths, yoga, journaling, these things flood our social media feeds. And don't get me wrong, these things can help. Taking care of yourself matters. But self-care has become a way for people to be avoidant, a way to say, that's your problem to fix. I'm not intending to say that support needs to replace self-care, but self-care is just not enough without support. We need to see an approach and a culture shift in how we approach mental health, rather than treating it as a personal burden, but a collective responsibility of all of us to care now. We live in a society that celebrates independence while quietly watching people fall apart in silence. We praise and strength, but ignore the systems that are breaking people down in the first place. It is not brave to survive alone. It is a failure of the people around you when you have to. Until we stop romanticizing self-reliance and start building cultures of actual care, nothing changes. But that care doesn't just have to come from professionals with years of experience or a degree. One powerful example of community-driven support is the Friendship Bench Project in Zimbabwe, which was curated after 20 years of community research. Dr. Chibanda and his team found that the community needed extra support. Clinical care wasn't doing enough or maybe wasn't approaching it in the right way for many people. So rather than funding clinics or refreshing the thinking of current professionals, as you might expect, they trained 600 grandmothers. Yes, grandmothers in evidence-based talk therapy. These grandmothers were community volunteers with no prior medical or mental health experience who were trained to counsel patients for usually 6 45-minute structured sessions on wooded benches. A randomized controlled trial published in JAMA in 2016 found that those undergoing this friendship bench therapy were 3 times less likely to remain depressed after 6 months versus standard care. Anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and overall well-being improved significantly. We often believe that we have to have years of experience. We have to have years of experience, a degree, to be supportive in the right way. But these grandmothers reshape this way of thinking. They show us that we just need a little bit of time, a little bit of empathy, and that will go such a long way. I vividly remember this one teacher. She noticed that I was struggling, and rather than just flagging me on her role, she sat me down one lunchtime and genuinely wanted to hear about what was going on in my life. She allowed me to just vent and get it all out. And then we sat together and created an action plan and tried to figure out some extracurriculars that I could maybe let go of to allow me to have some space to just breathe. That one act of care made me feel as though I had someone in my corner, someone at school to support me, someone who cared. And she didn't have to do any of that. She could have gone about her day, ticked a box on her role, or left it for someone else. But she showed up. And that one lunchtime made a world of difference. And it also reminded me that showing up for others can happen in so many different forms. I want to tell you about my beautiful friend, James Watson, because he is just the epitome of this. He was a youth MP alongside me and was a World Vision Ambassador who advocates for meaningful change. And I want to talk about him because he shows us that supporting and helping others can happen in more than just one traditional way. In July, James spoke in Parliament about the growing youth mental health crisis that is taking place here in Aotearoa. And across his shirt, he had hand-drawn 617 hearts, each one representing someone who'd taken their own life in the past year in Aotearoa. James didn't just speak with conviction. He wore his grief, his love, his solidarity across his chest. He spoke not just for himself, but for anyone he's known who struggled and those who couldn't stand there themselves. That is what showing up looks like. That is what collective care means. But acts of support don't have to be that large or grand scale. We can show up every day, but I can acknowledge that sometimes it's really hard to know how. We can begin by looking at this idea of collective care. And care, I found, can actually be the perfect acronym. C, check in with loved ones, genuinely and regularly. Ask them if they are okay, and if you feel it in your gut that they are not, ask them again. A, allow for safe environments that are judgment-free. Don't compare their struggles to ones of your own or others. Allow them a space to just get it all out. R, reach out through action. Offer to spend quality time with them, make them a meal, or go with them to do some of the hard things. And most importantly, E, engage consistently. Whether someone is struggling or not, check in, be there, show up. Because preventative care is about being there before the crisis and not just during it. We can no longer ignore the fact that mental health is an ongoing problem that isn't just going to go away. According to the World Health Organization, suicide is now the 3rd leading cause of death for 15 to 29-year-olds across the world. And the scary truth is more than 720,000 people take their own life to suicide every year. 720,000. But at the end of the day, that is just a number. When we break it down, it is 720,000 dreams that could have been, 720,000 grieving families, 720,000 people who felt they had no other way out. It is now not just a negative statistic. It is our friends, our families, our loved ones. When James spoke in Parliament about how each heart represented someone who had taken their own life in Aotearoa, I couldn't help but cry. Because one of those hearts was a beloved friend of mine who had taken their life earlier this year. And I didn't even know they were struggling that much. I had a gut feeling that something just wasn't right, but I didn't reach out. And I can't express to you now how much I wish I did. We might not get it perfect, but showing up for those around us is better than doing nothing at all. People love to keep calling me strong. They say it like it's a compliment, like it's proof I'm doing well, but sometimes it just feels like a polite way of saying, I'm glad you're handling that, so I don't have to. We've started romanticizing self-reliance to the point where seeking help is seen as a weakness. And surviving in silence earns more praise than seeking help. But the truth is, I don't want to be admired for surviving alone anymore. I want to live in a world where we don't have to, where I don't have to. I want to live in a world where I can be this Abby, confident, driven, and successful. But I can also live in a world where I'm accepted as this Abby, the little girl that just misses her dad, where my grief can be talked about, listened to, and supportive. We need to see a culture shift in how we approach mental health. We've replaced silence with checking in, judgment with connection, apathy with empathy. I know sometimes it can feel awkward, or we feel worried that we're going to say the wrong thing. But the truth is, there is no perfect thing to say. I would have so much rather someone reach out imperfectly than said nothing at all. I wish I could have done that for my friend. If we normalize supporting each other, we normalize being able to ask for help too. And if when we start supporting each other, we create a world where no one has to suffer in silence. And that is our collective responsibility. Thank you.